it's the most practical idea or ideas
Mm-hmm.
to build your culture and to live your culture.
Mm-hmm.
My experience is that they had a hard time leaving.
Oh, that's what the grapevine is saying. Yes.
It's
Which
hard
is
to leave. It makes it,
great.
which is what you want too. You don't want people
Yes.
to leave, or at least you want them to second guess. Or even better is to take that culture
With them,
and
right?
take it
Yeah.
with them and
Yeah.
take it.
Well, hello and welcome. I am so excited to bring to you today another episode of our Wellbeing Works show. And I have with me today Ms. Sherri Ristau. She is the founder of Amethyst Bold, which is a faith-based leadership and relationship company. So, Sherri, welcome, welcome. And I would love for you to share a little bit more about some of your professional background, and if you choose to, any personal fun fact, you're welcome to share as well.
Oh, sure. Well, thanks, Gilda. I was just saying how much I loved our first visit, so it's great to see you again and be with you today. My background, I had a great career. I was so blessed in serving in leadership roles at community foundations. So I was the president, CEO of two different community foundations, the first in Southwest Minnesota, and the second was in the Quad Cities, which is Iowa, Illinois, just about straight west of Illinois, Chicago on the Mississippi River. And just both were great, super wonderful opportunities working with great people, great boards, great communities, and really had the chance to really work with leaders of communities. And so 28 years of being a president, CEO, almost 30 years. I've spent the last year or so, I've just had this great opportunity to reflect on leadership. And, it's so important. I did a lot of work, especially in my first president CEO job in Southwest Minnesota, did a lot of work with business leaders. And worked a lot to help start businesses in, a rural part of Minnesota, start and expand businesses to create economic opportunities for rural Minnesota. And so just really had this unique opportunity, even though I was working for a nonprofit, I never felt like I wasn't a nonprofit because I was so connected to business and business leaders. And our board, both the board in Minnesota and then as we transformed the organization in the Quad Cities, really brought in business leadership to that board as well.
Yeah, that's great. Well, so it's good to get the context of your background for sure.
Yeah.
And I remember from our last conversation, we had talked about you being the leader of those organizations that didn't necessarily start out with a positive workplace culture, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. So I was hoping today our focus would be on you helping us take us through that journey of maybe where you started, and you're welcome to share what, however it makes sense to you.
Sure.
But kind of where you were when you first came to those organizations, what that looked like. And I'm just very, very curious to follow your journey in terms of what the kinds of changes that you made and what resources you used to do that. So super excited to have you.
Yeah.
Did you want to start with the one in Minnesota first?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. The organization at that time was just a little over 10 years old. And I think the best way to describe the challenge that I went into was at that time, they were a little over 10 years, I was the 5th executive director.
Wow.
And that doesn't count several interims. So there was just this evolving leadership in that organization. And so that's the kind of organization I walked into. And The other thing that was happening in that organization is the decision had been made before I accepted the position that they were going to move the office. And if you know anything about rural areas and regions, where the office is located really matters. So we moved the office, and that led to a lot of major change, just in not just office location, but even the staffing and how we went about staffing the office. In my very first role as a president or executive director, then president CEO, I really was hungry for ways to lead and best practices that would really make me a good leader. And I learned, you know what? I'm sorry. I thought I knew the book I read, but I just know it was a book on executive leadership. And the book talked about three priorities or three common priorities of good leadership or good, of organizations and businesses. And those three, first and foremost, was your board of directors, because they can make or break, right? They hire or fire the CEO. That's their number one role. So building a board and having relationships with your board is just really, really important, and to be on the same page as your board. The second was relationships. As a president, CEO, relationship, not just with your board, but with your customers, with your clients, your donors, with your partner organizations or partners in business, whatever that might look like. And of course, your staff and your employees, relationship. And the third was this idea of culture.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very high priority. So I really understood the idea of, why the board is important, and certainly relationships as it relates to all the people that you're interacting with. But this idea of culture, what is that? And I quickly realized in my very first role, as we were making these major changes of moving the office, which led to a lot of new staff turnover, establishing the culture of an organization was absolutely critical to the success of the organization. And, there's that famous quote, I believe it's Stephen Covey, that goes something like, culture trumps strategy, or culture trumps everything, right? I mean, you can have the best plans, you can be the greatest CEO, but if you haven't built or if you don't have a culture to support yourself as a leader, or a culture to succeed at whatever it is, business, nonprofit, your mission,
right?
You'll never get it. You'll never win. You won't accomplish what you really want to accomplish, whether it's your dream, your strategy, your strategic plan, your goals, whatever it might be. So this idea that culture trumps. So if you read Good to Great, I think that's where it is. It's like, it is so important. So that being said, I really set out, I took it really serious about culture. And I didn't necessarily want to be different. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be better. I wanted to be the place that people wanted to work. I wanted to be the place that people love to come and visit. It's kind of like, I say this about my home as well. I want people to come to my house, and I want them to be so comfortable, and I don't want them to leave. I want them to feel so comfortable. They just want to stay. And if they do have to leave, they can't wait to come back. That's the kind of home, that's the kind of office, the culture that I strive for. So then you figure out, so how am I going to do that? Or how do we do that? And then I honestly don't remember how I got introduced to it. but it was this little book called Fish. And I read it. In fact, I should almost grab my copy. I have a really old edition copy of the book Fish, and I loved it. It's the most practical idea or ideas
Mm-hmm.
to build your culture and to live your culture.
And Sherri, I just want to applaud you because that was quite some years ago when culture wasn't even talked about.
We're talking
Yeah.
later in the 90s. So
That's
I was,
amazing.
well,
So you're
yeah,
ahead of your time, you know? So this is just
it was a long time
all
ago.
you knew was, hey, you wanted to create a work environment where people wanted to be, and kind of like the home environment of just welcoming, comfortable, not wanting to leave, or if they have to leave, then they want to be back.
Right.
So that's
right.
awesome.
Right. And so I was even, I'm the proof actually. I actually worked for the organization we're talking about. I actually worked for that organization in the mid to late 80s and then I left and I was recruited back for the leadership role.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
I knew about this organization. I knew the possibilities,
Mhm.
but they had just been they had been floundering. I mean, through all those leadership changes,
Right.
it was time to really grab hold.
Yeah. And Sherri, can you give us a picture of what the day-to-day was like back then, or when you first got into that organization again? In terms of like how people were working, like what was it actually like?
Well, again, all great people.
Mhm.
And I'm going to say this about both organizations, really good organizations, and really, really awesome people. But they weren't on the same page.
Okay.
That's how I'm going to describe it. Not they weren't on the same page.
Okay.
Um,
Meaning was there conflict or tension or?
Some conflict, some tension. I'm going to say unhealthy competitiveness.
Okay.
This is, I always, I always tell new employees, if I ever hear the words, going in, no, this is for the existing employees. If I ever hear the words, well, we do it that way because we've always done it that way.
Ooh.
That's a huge red flag.
Okay.
Just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean we have to always do it that way. Number one. And number two, does that mean we can't explore new ways, better ways?
Right.
Or can we take whatever way it is and tweak it so that it is more broadly owned or more people can get engaged in? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So the other way to describe, I think, the cultures that I walked into where they were in silos. So at a community foundation, you've got development, you've got grant making. In our case, we had our loans, our loan and finance department, and then you got operations.
Okay.
And so when you get into your silos, you might shine as the expert, you might shine in your area of expertise and knowledge and experience. But if you're not able to weave in and out of all the silos to help each other all be better, to really take the whole organization to another level, you're not healthy. You're not, it's not helpful. It's helpful to you,
Right.
but it's not helpful to the team and to the organization, because at the end of the day, every single person matters. Every single job, every single role, everybody matters. I don't care if you're the president, CEO, to the secretary, receptionist. I don't know. In a business, it's the laborer, it's the guy, it's the man or woman who's on the floor, putting the putting things together that you ultimately go into a machine that you ultimately, whatever it is, a machine, I think of machine shops, that are, building things, so whether you're on the floor doing it or you're overseeing it, whatever.
Absolutely.
Without
So those
yeah,
are some interesting observations that you made about the conflict and the unhealthy competitiveness, et cetera. And so you knew that something had to change with the culture, and you discovered the fish book, which is fantastic. And because of Sherri and I's conversation, I had the chance to catch up with that reading, and it is awesome. Like she mentioned, I love how simple and practical it is, like you talked about. And what's kind of unique about that book is it's done in a storytelling format that makes it
yes,
really easy to follow and relate to. And
yeah,
it seems so simple, but
yes,
honestly, I think those are the core principles of what a healthy collaborative workplace looks
right.
like. Sherri, tell me more then about
So,
how then you
yeah.
started to
So let
shake
me
things
share
up.
this. So very early on, in Minnesota, after we got the office moved, I started a tradition of giving everybody a book for Christmas. We all read the same book, right? And the very first book the team in Minnesota got from me was the fish book.
Oh, great.
And so everybody read the fish book. And then from there, we started building what I call our fish culture. I actually call it the fish culture. I don't take away from what this is all about, and it's based on the fish market in Seattle, and the 4 principles. And so let's not keep people in suspense. The
Yes.
4 principles, are number 1, choose your attitude. Okay, number 2 is to play, have fun. And we're going to go into all of these a little bit more. But then 3rd is make their day. And 4th is be present. So let me just say right from the get-go, when I read that book, I was like, this is so simple. Here's what I love most about fish is that these 4 principles, not only are they simple, but they're just 4. There are just 4 things you have to remember. Usually it's just 3, so there's a little challenge. You got to remember that 4th one. But I can promise you that if you read this book with your team, between all of you, you will remember these 4. So let's just talk a little bit about them. So choose your attitude. I am a firm believer in what goes on in our heads is the most important thing for us to have success. This is affirmed in science. This is affirmed in neuroscience. I mean, it is what we think is what we become, right?
Mhm.
And how we think. And so choosing your attitude is an opportunity to really think about who you want to be. When you walk through the doors of your business or through the doors of your organization or going to work, what's your attitude going to be? Is it going to be positive or is it going to be negative? Let's just make it basic. Positive or negative? Do you want to have a great day or is it going to be a dull day? Or is it just going to be the same old, same old? You get to choose what it's going to be like. And even if the coffee was cold that morning or the coffee pot didn't work before you left for the office, you can still decide once you get to the office how you're going to think and what your attitude's going to be. Does that make sense? So first of all, choose that attitude. And then second is the play idea. And, this might sound kind of frivolous and whatever, but, we spend a lot of time in our jobs and at work. Many of us spend more time at work than we do in our own homes, right? So let's have fun. Let's play and have some fun together. Let's not be let's not just put our nose to the grindstone. But I think of people in their cubicles and never coming out and never having fun. I'm like, there are ways to have fun, believe me, even if you're in cubicles. And I'm just going to give you a quick example. So in Minnesota, we have snow, right? And and in the Quad Cities, we have snow. I think we did this in the Quad Cities. I am jumping to that one. But one of the, and this wasn't even my idea. Remember, as a leader, I only brought fish to the team. And because everybody bought in, which is important, one of the team members bought a bunch of those styrofoam snowballs. And so you could walk through our office at any given time and you would see snowballs flying around between the cubicles. They were throwing snowballs at each other just for fun, And I remember one time them throwing a whole bunch of snowballs into my office. And you know what? It all made us laugh. We're all smiling. So I'm just going to say, even if you have a bad attitude, it's going to change your attitude.
That's great. And I just wanted to add, Sherri, that, it was one of those concepts that it's not that you're not taking your business seriously. That's definitely not the whole,
Gilda, you're so right. Yes.
And it's more about, hey, not taking ourselves so seriously, right? So we're taking the business and what we need to do very seriously.
Oh, yes.
But there's this element of levity that just makes it easier and a happier place for people to work.
Yes, a happier place. And then third is to make their day. And I actually say, I used to tell members of my team, it is your job every day to make somebody's day.
Oh, I love that.
If you leave the office and you have not made someone else's day by something you say, something you do, something you give, there are multiple ways to make someone's day.
Yeah.
But if you have not made someone else's day in the office, you're walking out having missed out big time.
Oh, I love that. Wow.
Because when you make someone else's day, you make your own day.
Yes.
You really do. When you make someone else's day. Now, I would take it even further to say it is your job to make not just your coworkers' day, but the people you're interacting with. Even if you're the finance person and you're paying the bills, your job to make those vendors happy, make their day, stay on time or early or something. When you talk to a vendor, make their day, find ways to make their day.
And Sherri, what do you say, or what would you say to your staff if they were a little reluctant and said, well, I don't have time for that. I got to do my job. I love that you reframe it like this is your job.
It is your job.
But was there any initial resistance with, well, like, I don't have time to do this. And what are you talking about? Make someone else's day. I barely have time to do my own stuff, right? That comes from that attitude piece. But what would you say and I don't know if you got resistance like that.
Honestly, I didn't, but I think if I did, I would have said, not just is it your job, but it literally takes a second. So, and I can give you, we could brainstorm examples. I'm just like, for example, you get up from your desk, you go to the bathroom, right?
Right.
So you don't want to bother people. So you quietly go to the bathroom and you come back. And all you have to do is stop in one cubicle and whisper in someone's ear that you like what they're wearing, or you appreciate something. It takes a second. And you whisper it and then you leave. You don't even, are you interrupting them? Well, of course, if they're on a phone call, if they're doing something, you're not going to do that. Here's another really quick one. You want a glass of water, so you go get a glass of water. Grab two.
Yeah.
Grab two and take someone else in the office a glass of water. Everybody needs to be drinking water. We have water challenges, so because we're all supposed to be drinking more water or coffee, whatever it is.
Yeah. Think random acts of kindness.
Simple, easy ways to do this. This is not rocket science. Anybody And I mean, anybody can do this. And the fourth and final one is to be present, right? And I always go like this, right? I'm looking at you through the screen and I'm pointing right at your eyes.
Yeah.
Like, I am going to look at you. I'm not going to look at my phone. You know, that's the big distraction today, right? Is looking at our phones. But I'm going to be focused on you, on who either you're talking to me or I'm talking to you. And this is it. Nothing more.
Yes.
Be present. Listen. Hear. You know, there's a reason God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we would listen more and speak less. Be present, listen and hear, and be available for people. Anyway, so, and everything we're talking about, I started to say this earlier and I didn't finish what I was thinking or saying what I was thinking at the time. And that is, we're talking about coworkers, but everything we're talking about applies to your customers, to your donors, to your vendors. I mean, it applies to everyone. Imagine if you're a nonprofit, if you can make, you know, your client's day or whoever you're serving, you know, a homeless person, make their day, or the donor who's giving to you so you can help the homeless person. Make that donor's day. Find ways to make their day. And it's easy. So I'm going to tell you, I have to tell you a really quick story. And I don't think I came up with this. But in both, well, it must have started in Minnesota and then it carried over to the Quad Cities. When you call the office at those places, I don't know if they're still doing it, but they would answer the phone saying, "It's a great day at whatever the business is. How can I help you?" Better to even say, "How can I make your day?"
Yeah.
It's a great day at, how can I make your day? You know, I mean, wouldn't that be, what a great way to answer the phone, focused on who's on the other side calling you. There are so many things you can do. So again, I have to back up and say, so 4, choose your attitude, play, I say have fun, you know, make someone's day, make somebody else's day, and then be present. Listen all the time.
That's awesome. And I think, you know, I just want to share with the audience how we got introduced, because I actually was talking to one of Sherri's director of development over at Quad Cities Foundation, and she and I were just chatting, and I was telling her, hey, I'm doing this new Wellbeing at Work series and, you know, looking for folks to interview. And she said, you know, the reason why we have such a great place to work at now, where people literally don't even want to leave. She said it was from our predecessor. In other words, their executive director now is sort of carrying the torch forward. She's already continuing the work that Sherri has done, but Sherri is the one that initiated it. She's like, I think you need to talk to Sherri. And what I was always thinking is, wow, this sounds fascinating. And even in our first conversation, Sherri was just so upfront, like, here are the 4 fish principles, and super enthused and super excited about it. And I guess one of the things that I was super, super interested to know was, well, it's one thing reading a book and a totally different next level to then how do you actually integrate the concepts and make it the fabric of your culture? And that's what Sherri's done at 2 organizations. So Sherri, I'd love to know, were these things just on a personal level that you resonated with, you had to work on as well as you're introducing them? Or like, what did that all look like? And how did you step by step, you know, obviously the book, having her read it is a first great step, but that's only a very small piece of how you integrated so successfully.
So I did this in Minnesota too, but I think it was in the Quad Cities that it just really resonated. And that is, once they got the book for Christmas and they all read it.
Yeah.
We sat down as a team. And again, I want to emphasize that the people in the organization, the employees at the time I came to the Quad Cities, were awesome people. Okay. It was a great group of people.
Mm-hmm.
So I gave them the book because I recognized there were issues. You could
Sure.
feel it. When you don't have a good culture, it's kind of in the air. You know, it's all those things we talked about, right? Tense, competitiveness, just disruptive. It's not fun. You might even dread going to work. One of the first things that I facilitated in both places, but I'm going to talk about the Quad Cities a little bit, is that, and hopefully they don't mind because it turns out so good, but we went through this exercise, and this is actually in the book, where you draw a big T, and on one side you draw, we talk about culture, and there is not one person on this planet who doesn't want a good culture. Everybody wants this. This is not just the presidency. Everybody wants this. So you put culture at the top, you talk about, and then you start talking about what's a toxic culture, which is in the book, a toxic culture, and then what's a healthy culture. And then I just stepped back and I let them, and we brainstorm. I asked them to brainstorm. Tell me all the things that you would associate with a toxic culture. Like the tension, the competitiveness, the dread, the disrespect. I mean, there's a whole bunch of words that you can come up with to describe toxic culture. But then you can also describe, so what does a healthy culture look like? And and then at the end of that exercise, what do we want? Not what does Sherri, your president and CEO, want? What's the kind of place that you want to come to work every single day? And so that's how you start really, you introduce this, you read the book, you talk about the differences, and then you talk about what we can do. And then you incorporate those 4 fish principles and you put them everywhere. I mean, I think the sign might have been up till the day I left.
Oh, wow.
I might have been up all 6-7 years there, of what those 4 principles were.
Yeah.
And you can incorporate this in so many different ways. In fact, here's what I'm going to say. As the leader, the only thing I really did was introduce it. I gave the book, I facilitated that discussion. And to your point, Jill, is something you said, is whatever you as the leader put out there, you have to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? You have to live and breathe, promote, demonstrate, be all about those 4 principles. And you're absolutely right. Some come more natural than others.
Yeah.
So the one that this might surprise you, the one that's the hardest for me is play and have fun. Because I'm like, I mean, I'm all about people. I love people. I'm so guilty of loving people probably too much. But I can definitely make your day. I can choose my attitude because I'm present. I can listen, but that play and have fun, that's a challenge for me. And we're all different, okay? Yeah. That doesn't mean I can't have fun and play. But once you as a leader release this and you support and encourage this, and then you model it and you do it. One of the things that I did is everybody got a stuffed fish and said, oh, I wish I had mine. I gave everybody little stuffed fishes, like little stuffed animals. And if nothing else, you could throw fishes around.
Sure.
I used to think we could throw money around because I was working in a philanthropic organization and we were always giving money away, right? We were granting money. I always thought it'd be fun to throw thousands, fake
I like that.
around or whatever. So, I mean, I do have ideas and I do think of things. Again, if you as a leader aren't willing, and here's what happens. So, and this happened in both places. Once you do this and your team buys in and this starts to happen, they run you. The only thing I'm going to say as a leader is you need to let them run with it. And they
Oh,
do
that's
things that
great.
are a little
Yeah.
like, are you serious? Like those snowballs. You don't want people throwing snowballs around? Well, let it go. It doesn't, let them have fun, right? If you're
Wow.
questioning different things, trust them. So in the end, I think again in both places, at least in the Quad Cities, that before when I left, we had, if you were interviewing for a job,
Mhm.
one of your last interviews was with someone from each different part of the foundation, you know, those silos that we talked about.
Yeah.
Each of those departments or those areas of our foundation, a member from each of those teams. And then we would do what we called a fish interview. And we would ask questions that were all around 4 principles of fish
Ooh.
to see how people responded.
Right.
Because hiring the new employee, what was more important to me than any, I
Yeah.
mean, they might have great skills, they might be the most talented person on earth, but if they didn't fit our culture,
Yes.
it could kill the culture. One person can make all the difference in the world, both in making the culture and destroying the culture that you're trying to achieve.
And Sherri, did you have any folks that once you introduced the fish principles that they were not a fit and you had to let go of?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
If they didn't self-select, yes. But mostly, and number one is they self-selected. I mean, they
Yeah.
eventually left the organization.
Okay.
And, you know, and in fairness to them, it might have been more that they needed a change. You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
for
I
sure.
mean, I get that. I want to be super respectful
Mhm.
because, again, this is probably the third or fourth time I said this because I don't want to disrespect
Yeah.
any former employee that I got to work with
Mhm.
because they were amazing.
No,
Really
that definitely comes through. I don't doubt that
Um,
for a second.
but I can say that once you worked in one of the organizations that I led,
Mhm.
my experience is that they had a hard time leaving.
Oh, that's what the grapevine is saying. Yes.
It's
Which
hard
is a
to leave. It makes it,
great.
which is what you want too. You don't want people
Yes.
to leave, or at least you want them to second guess, you
Yeah.
know, or even better is to
Uh-huh.
take that culture
With them.
and
Right.
take it
Yeah.
with them and
Yeah.
take it.
No, I was just gonna say another question that came up was, especially when you're first introducing it, did people start to call each other out if maybe an attitude wasn't in check or anything of that nature? Because you may remember you're coming from a sort of a toxic like environment
Right.
to, ooh, these are these great new principles. They've seen what the healthy versus the toxic looks like. Yes, they're choosing this is how we want ours to be, but there's still, if someone maybe their thing was their attitude wasn't quite adjusted right, you might still have some of that seeping over. So I'm just curious, were there issues like that and how the team and you dealt with that?
You know, a little bit, but here's what I'm going to say. Again, you as a leader have to model this, right?
Great. Yes.
And so if someone was having a real attitude issue, what do you want to do for that person?
Treat
Make
them
them
kindly and understand them.
well, no, well, that of course.
Right.
And guess what? You want to make their day.
Aw. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Okay?
Well, but that's a
So,
total different shift.
so
Wow.
there are ways that those 4 fish principles serve each other. You
Ooh.
know, because let's face it, we're all human.
Right.
We all have our moments, our days, our
Sure.
time,
Sure.
whatever. But when you build a fish culture, it is so it's healthy, and it can take what's not healthy and help make it healthy.
Mm.
That makes sense.
Yes. Yes.
It's just it's contagious. I think it's contagious.
Well,
You know,
especially if you've lived it and breathed it. And I
right?
remember, Anne saying that, gee, not Sherri just you really embodied that. And I was like, wow, this is, and people read books all the time or the latest thing in culture, which is fantastic. But you took these principles and you made them your own, and you made them part of who you are and how you work, both personally and professionally. And that's what's so admirable. And that's why I'm like, people need to hear this. People need to know, there's these great consultants that do all the work. And for sure, if that's the kind of help you need, by all means, I'm doing it through the coaching lens. So happy to help. But if you can listen to this and do the work on your own and get the results like Sherri did, then this is the whole goal. We want more healthier, happier workplaces. That's the goal. No matter how you get there.
So, as mutual coaches here, I just want to say what we can do. I think coaching, I had an executive coach. Executive coaches are so important. I had one, all pretty much in Minnesota and all through the Quad Cities. So valuable for you as a leader. But I call it the most important thing about a coach is what I call the gentle accountability, the follow through. And so I believe leaders can easily adopt 4 fish principles to build a culture. But let's face it, it's a change. And we as leaders, for this to work, you must demonstrate the 4. You must. There is no way this can ever work if you're not willing as the leader to just live and breathe these 4 principles. It is so important. Because then no one can question your intent, your why.
Like you were talking about, of the 4, the one that was the most challenging for you was the having fun or play. So if there was a situation, especially in the beginning, when you're first starting to roll it out, and I know you said you learned to let them run with it, but maybe in the beginning it's like, oh wait, they should be working and maybe I should say something. So if there was any kind of slip, if I don't even know if there was, that, oh, oops, you reprimanded somebody and you're like, oh yeah, the fun one. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. How did you focus on that and how did you address it? Because I know vulnerability for leaders has been a big one. And I think it's important that, just even in your own personal household, for example, I'll sometimes have to be really honest and open of, well, I tell my girls not to blame, but then if I'm guilty, oh mom, you're blaming. Oh, you know what? You're right. I'm blaming. It's my fault, and I'm gonna, correct it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I think this goes back to something we talked about just a little bit ago. I honestly do not remember. I can't remember ever reprimanding anybody for doing something related to the fish principles ever. Did I ever question things they did?
Sure.
Yep. But I will also tell you, if it was around the 4, I held my tongue. And I really had to think twice, if not 3 or 4. I waited a day or 2 before I said anything to make sure I wasn't overreacting.
Okay.
With the play and have fun, it can't be at the cost of the business.
Sure.
The organization. For example, really important to me was that the community foundations that I led have a very professional image. I wanted to be known as the most professional nonprofit in the area. So you can still play and have fun and be the ultra professional in your community. Okay. It can. You might want to lay some of what's most important to you. So the professional image was important to me in terms of how people saw the organization that I was leading, how you want your customers to see your organization. So, you might have to lay some parameters, but
sure.
I'm just going to say, you absolutely can, and maybe even should do that, depending on your group and the employees. But do it in context of what's most important for the organization, for your mission, for your vision of your business, whatever it is that you're leading. Because that's important. And after all, that's what's bringing you together as a team.
Right.
We all got to buy into that vision and mission. We all got to be on the same page. We all want the same thing. And again, that's your job as a leader, to make sure everybody knows, understands, and buys into that vision and mission. But once you have the buy-in, I don't think you're going to have any trouble implementing these 4. But again, you have to live and breathe them and model them yourself.
Okay. When you said earlier that when something happened around the 4 fish principles and you had to hold your tongue, could you elaborate a little bit more about that? Meaning like, oh, somebody violated one and you're like, oh.
No, I can actually. So we actually had, I think we did this in both places, but I think we even might have called it the fish. We actually had a group, again, one team member and it rotated, so everybody got an opportunity, but we actually rotated. We had a member from each team come together, and they met, I don't know, once or twice a month for 30 minutes, 30 minutes each time. And their job was to come up with the play activities or the fun activities for us as a group.
Yeah.
Okay? I tried to always either be on the team or at least ask them, kind of run this by me, like, just because I don't want to be surprised.
Right.
So those are the little things you can do to make sure of that. But I will. So I remember one time they were just planning things, and I think I just wanted to make sure we weren't out of the office too much or too much in 1 month or, whatever. So, I mean, just, you have to work with your team and with what you have. And it's, and you can do that in a way that's healthy and supportive and proactive. At the end of the day, they knew I was the president CEO and I had to answer to the board, and I'm ultimately responsible. If something goes wrong, who are they going to look at? Who are they going to come?
Right.
And I think, again, if you've earned the respect of your employees and the team members, it's just never an issue. When we went through our computer conversion, which is, so painful, right? Or the software conversion, I will never forget this. I believe this is when we did it. Oh, it was so amazing. I didn't come up with this. We took old computers because they were just taking up space and storage. The play team actually arranged. We all took turns. We all put on glasses. Might even put on a hard hat.
Really?
And we took these sledgehammers and we destroyed computers.
It must have been super gratifying. Wow.
So hilarious. I have never laughed so hard in all my life. It was so hilarious. Now, initially I might have been like, we're going to what? Are you kidding? Can we do that? Even I've got Siri here questioning me right now on that one. Anyway, so again, the team organized themselves to implement those 4 fish principles. In the Quad Cities, we really wanted some nice space for the team to hang out. Kitchen, we had a break room kitchen that it just wasn't anything nice. I mean, it was fine, but it wasn't great, okay? Well, we wanted to create a nice space. So when an office across from the kitchen became available, the fish team, or a team, again, a member from each department got together, and they put up this newspaper or whatever so no one could see in, and they redid that room. And they named it the fish room.
Oh, neat.
And it was the place to go. It had a couch and a chair. It had games. It had people and chairs to eat your lunch.
Nice.
It was just the most inviting space. The kitchen was across the hall, and then it was this room and I didn't do this. They
Yeah.
did. The staff did this. They called
Wow.
it the fish room.
I love that. That's
And they did.
awesome.
Yeah.
No, and I love your perspective in it, for leaders that are listening in, Sherri's just made it so easy. Well, it sounds easy at least, which is she's there to support, introduce, and really keep all these fish principles alive and going. Yet when necessary, she'll lay out different guidelines or whatever needs to be communicated. And in fact, Sherri, if you want to share, remember our last conversation, you said there's only one thing you ask of your people, which is don't surprise her, right? It was
Oh yeah. No surprise.
yes, and it is simple as it sounds. I love that because Sherri, just explain a little bit more about that. I thought that was
Well, I
amazing.
think as a leader, you just, I don't need to be in control. I really don't. I mean, everybody thinks we have control issues, and to a point we all do, but
Sure.
I don't need to control this. But as your leader, I need to be informed.
Yes.
I just need to know. I don't even need to know everything. But keep me informed what you're thinking, or think about what I do need to know versus what I don't need to know, so that because I, as your leader, I want to fully support what you're doing. Like, I had no idea what that fish room was going to look like, but I did know some basics. They kept me informed on some basics. They asked for a couple things. We got a budget put together so they would have some money to buy things. I mean, I didn't know everything. I had no idea what they were paint because I don't care what color they painted. That's up to them.
Right.
I think it was like a fishbowl, but I don't remember even that for sure. But anyway,
and that's part of the fun of it too, right?
Yes.
Like you can make it a fun out of that.
Right. You know what? And you do have to trust your employees. Okay. Let's be honest. As leaders, I just said we don't have to know everything.
Sure.
But that's where trust comes in.
Yeah.
You have to trust people. And and let me say this. This doesn't happen overnight.
Okay, please. Yes.
Take the time. Give yourself as a leader the time to embrace this, to think it through, and think through how you want to do this. Work with the coach. Tell them what you want to do. Ask them to hold you accountable. I mean, again, that's a little self-serving because you and I are coaches, but there are things that you can do as a leader to make culture a high priority, because your culture will trump any strategy, goal, good thinking every time. If you don't have the culture you need and the employees.
Yeah, and Sherri, what would your advice be to leaders who are not quite at the level where they say that they could trust their employees? What advice would you give to them?
I would ask them the question, what has to be true for them to trust their employees?
Ooh, that's a great question.
What would have to be true for them to trust either a employee or a team or whatever it is? And then take the steps to make that truth reality.
And it's something that the leader does, because I feel like sometimes it's, this employee, they're not being as accountable or as responsible as I would like. So in those types of situations, my thought is giving them some guidance, giving them some of the right questions to get them to that level.
Right. Well, right. And so let's just stick with that for a minute. I mean, I think as a leader, you want to ask that employee, you might share with that employee, here's my experience. I see you do X and this creates Y, right?
Okay, yep.
This is your experience. What has to be true so that I can trust when you do X, Y will be even better, or Y will accomplish what it is the company or organization needs. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I like that. I like the words, what has to be true.
Mm-hmm.
It really makes you think about your role as the leader and, the employee and who they are and what has to happen
Mm-hmm.
for, the best thing for the best outcome.
Right. And you're asking the employee this question so that it's coming from them and they can
Right,
take the ownership and then you
right,
can work with them on that.
right, right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, no, this is super, super helpful. Sure, I feel like you've given us so much insight and we can go so many different directions, but I know I want to be respectful of your time as well.
Yes.
The other final thoughts before we let people know where people can find you of anything in terms of either on the challenge side, how you overcame them with fish, or just great little tidbits like you've already been sharing of what really made this work. And again, a lot of it sounded like it was something you offered, you supported them on, and you modeled the most important piece. And I think the hardest of
Yeah.
modeling that. It really is. And I feel like you just embodying that really is a stronger message than just the lip service of what you get giving to the fish principles, if that makes any sense.
Right, right. I think the challenge is keeping it alive
Yeah.
over time.
Okay.
It's keeping it alive. And again, I think you as the leader have to ask yourself the question, why, what's leading to it not being real and alive? And what can you as the leader do to not necessarily reinvent it, but to re-energize it? There may be things that you can do that just really boost those principles. Again, 4 principles. And as employees change or grow, you might have the same employees, but they're going to grow. So I think moving it around, moving the responsibility around of keeping it alive is also important. That it's not, obviously you have to model it and you have to support it and, all those things. But I think sharing the responsibility of keeping it alive is the key.
Yeah.
And I can almost guarantee you every new employee would, as part of, we'd always send them a welcome package of just different things before their first day. And it always included the fish book.
Nice.
And I always wrote a message in their book. When you get a new employee, get them engaged because new employees can really help keep it fresh.
Yeah.
New.
Great.
In fact, it's why new blood is always good, right? Because they'll come up with new thinking and new ideas and new ways to have fun and play and, make people's day. We're only limited by our own imaginations.
Love that.
I think the greatest challenge for me, especially in Minnesota, where, I was president there for 17 years, how do you keep it alive and real and pertinent? So anyway.
And Sherri, would you say with both organizations, any estimates of how long it took you to sort of get to, and again, we're always constantly, improving and evolving, but in general, where it was like, hey, I feel like we're in a good place with the fish principles.
Well, at least for me, these principles, at least those 3, there's a couple though, they just come natural. It's who Sherri is, right?
Yeah.
So I think, and lean into that. If you're about play, then lean into that. Lean into the principles that you're most about.
Yeah.
And then make sure you got other people who can lean in and do those other ones.
Nice.
Maybe not the best at, right?
Yeah.
So how long does it take? I want to say in both cases, it really didn't take that long. And part of it is just getting on top of the way you work together and communicate as a leader.
That's kind of a tough one, I'll be honest with you. I've, leaders that I'm working with now that struggle with the communication piece. And it's not necessarily something that comes natural. Let's put it that way, because culturally we're programmed that this is serious business. Some people don't have that natural, let's say, talent or inclination. And for them, the communication piece is more challenging because
Right.
this is how they were taught. This is how they were shown to be successful. So that's what they've done. And that's what they're continuing to do, which
Right.
is challenging. So in terms of maybe a leader who has that background, is working on the piece where you're at, that has that empathy and, hey, I want to be informed. I don't necessarily need to be in control, because this leader is sort of operating from, I still need the control and I need to be informed. And when I'm not informed, that is irritating, frustrating, sometimes even enraging. Do you have anything that, and maybe if you've never experienced it or been that way, that's just a total different conversation. But for any leaders that you've known that either have made a shift, or is there anything else you could offer that might help this kind of leader shift into one that you're embodying?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I would just say, for me, while you're thinking, the part about the attitude where it's more the self-talk, I feel like for this kind of leader, monitoring the self-talk, and if that self-talk is judgy, negative, that kind of stuff is coming out. And
Right.
I think a good starting spot would be the internal self-talk and giving themselves the self-compassion and grace
Right.
to start, because
Right.
it's seeping out and it's not their fault and it's okay. That's why
Right.
talking with a professional or friend or whatever is a good place as well,
Right.
to get the support you need to kind of come out of that self-talk. I think that's a good
I actually have a signature talk on this topic, similar on this topic, that I really want to help leaders who struggle with what I call distractions, because they're everywhere. But the number one distraction is our own head.
Yes.
And it's called doubts. It's doubts, doubting ourselves, doubt. I mean, doubt. And that doubt leads to disappointment, disagreement, dread. I mean, the list, I call it the dreaded D's. I think you need to be very proactive to get out of the dreaded D's. And I don't think and we all have our different ways of doing that. But again, I'm going to say those 4 fish principles work so well together that when you're in that spiral of dreaded G's, let's just say you're doubting, you want control, you're doubting your employees, you're doubting yourself, pick up one of those other principles. Go make an employee's day.
Ah, beautiful.
You know what? Go figure out how to have some fun, with your employee. And even if that means doing something for take an employee out for coffee.
Yeah.
And don't even plan on talking about whatever's bothering you. Just take them out for coffee or have a cup of coffee with them and just find out what's going on in their life. And listen and be present for them.
Beautiful. Wow, Sherri, that's awesome.
They're just so, as leaders, I mean, this is where my faith comes in. God puts you in a leadership position, and it's not to harm. It's not to hurt. It's to grow yourself and to grow other people and to have impact. I'm getting goosebumps because I'm guilty as you are, as we all are. We all make mistakes. We all have doubts. I have suffered from the dreaded D's.
Yes, we all have.
We all. And so find your friend, find your cohort. And if you don't have one, talk to Gilda or to call me. I mean, Join a gem group. That's what I do. I have what's called gem groups. You have something gem too, Gilda, remember? I mean, we both are engaged in this great work because we want to help leaders. We started out by just talking about leadership. Leaders are so important. And I believe that if you're in a leadership position, it's not just by chance.
Mm-hmm.
God's put you there for a reason.
Yeah. And speaking of which, Sherri, tell people where they can find you.
Yeah. So I do not have a website. You will find me on LinkedIn. You will find Amethyst Bold on LinkedIn and Facebook. But the best way to reach me is just through my email and through my cell number.
I'll put Sherri's information in the show notes.
Right.
Yeah.
But I am on LinkedIn, a direct message me on that or in Messenger, and just connect me to you. Say, yeah, you heard me on, Gilda's, show. I mean, and I need to thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, this has been such a pleasure. I'm so excited that you were willing to share all your words of wisdom and just help any organizations that want a healthier, happier culture, because this is what the show is all about.
Right.
And for those of you that are new to the channel, definitely take a look put Sherri's information in the show notes, but we'll also have your free guide on how to focus on your priorities and a daily happiness formula that might give you a boost. And then, like Sherri mentioned, just pick one of the 4 fish principles and focus and lean into that and just start there. Right. And so again, Sherri Ristau, thank you so much from Amethyst Bold. I'm so glad you were able to join us on the show and share your words of wisdom. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you in the next Wellbeing Works episode. Take care and have a great rest of your week.